UConn has done it. Back-to-back seasons of unprecedented NCAA tournament success. Dynasty confirmed.
Locked On Podcast Network presents the 2024 NCAA Bracket Breakdown. Presented by Nissan.
Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. We're your hosts. That's Andy Patton. I'm Isaac Schade. We're coming to you about half an hour after the end of the national championship game, the last live edition of the Locked On College Basketball, podcast this college basketball season. It's hard to believe it's come to an end, but that's where we are. For those of you in the Eastern time zone, happy Tuesday. To everyone else, happy Monday night still. That's what you get for a 9:20 Eastern tip. You've joined us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. Thanks for making us your first listen or watch. By the way, you can listen to every episode free on ad-free on Amazon Music. And a special shout out to all of you everydayers who have been there with us all season long. We can't tell you how thankful we are for every single one of you. Andy, we got to talk about this national championship game. UConn winning 75-60. We're going to unpack that. We want to talk about UConn's place in history because, boy, have they put their fingerprints on it. And Andy, we got to make sure we talk about what a special season this has been for Zach Edey and Matt Painter and company, redeeming what happened last year. So, Andy, let's just get right into this game itself. UConn, back-to-back national champions, 75-60 win. It was a phenomenal basketball game, the first half in particular, but UConn just kept UConning their way to stretch this lead out. It was unbelievable basketball. Andy, tell me where you want to start in this game.
Well, I think it was UConn did exactly what we knew they were going to do, what they were planning to do, the best way to attack Purdue, which is make somebody other than Zach Edey beat you. And UConn just happened to have the talent to really be able to do that better than many other teams kind of have. Many teams have tried to do this, have failed to do this. UConn actually has the personnel to do it. They have the coaching to do it. But still a huge shout out to those players for going out and executing, because I think that there's so many different things that, and you and I were joking about it before we actually hit the record button here, the amount of things that we can point to and say, that's the story of the game. The story of the game is that UConn out-rebounded Purdue. The story of the game is that, nobody outside of Braden Smith and Zach Edey scored in double figures. The story of the game is the way that Stephon Castle played. The story of there's just so many different things that it could be. But ultimately, to me, the fact that UConn was able to single cover Zach Edey, the fact that they were able to have Donovan Clingan play him in single coverage, and look, Zach Edey, he ate. He had 37 points in a national championship game on 15 of 25 shooting. I mean, that's 66% from the field with nearly 40 points. That is unprecedented levels of dominance in a college basketball game. But the problem is that Braden Smith had 12 and nobody else had more than 5. Lance Jones had 5. Fletcher Loyer didn't even score in this game. The bench for Purdue, they had 2 points. We're going to talk about those 2 points in a second because it was the most exciting play of the entire game. But that's the problem for Purdue. And this, it's not like this has been a consistent, huge issue for Purdue, but it was known to be like, hey, this is their Achilles heel. Like, this is the way to get them. I mean, this is in a very different setting, but this is how they lost to Fairleigh Dickinson, was you pack the paint on Zach Edey and you make somebody else beat you. Now, in this case, Edey just went to work, but nobody else was able to step up in a meaningful way. And I think you can look at the offensive performances. Tristen Newton had a phenomenal game. Cam Spencer hit some really big shots. I thought the way that they used Clingan to set the screens for Cam Spencer was really brilliant by Danny Hurley, because it forced Zach Edey in space against a player in Cam Spencer who can create his own shot in the mid-range and can step out and hit that free. But at the end of the day, you held Purdue to 60 points. And you held everybody on that team, not named Zach Edey, to 23 points. And more than anything else, that was the difference for UConn. And it's the reason that Danny Hurley is standing up there winning his second straight national championship.
And Andy, you talked about the scoring output being limited to basically Zach Edey and Braden Smith. But what was interesting to me also was that the distribution of the scoring was just limited to literally only Braden Smith. Braden Smith had 8 assists. Andy, Purdue as a team had 8 assists. So their ability to stop others from being playmakers was a crazy thing too beyond that. And you kind of mentioned that, but letting Zach Edey get his and UConn's game plan of, hey, look, this is the second leading team in the nation by 3-point field goal percentage. We're not going to let them beat us from outside. And that's exactly what happened. Andy, coming into this game, and this is where it gets so wild that we get these statistical anomalies in moments like this. It's just what happens in a one-off tournament. Prior to tonight, Purdue, the fewest 3-pointers they had made in a game all season long, Andy Patton, was 3. In this game, they went 1 of 7. So it's not even that they just only made one. They only attempted 7 threes, Andy. What a great game plan from this UConn team who, let's remember, their defense is just as elite as their offense. Here are the 3-pointers, the number of 3-pointers that Purdue had made in the 5 games in this tournament prior to this. 9, 11, 9, 3, and 10. And again, tonight, just 1. What a brilliant game plan from a brilliant basketball mind, Danny Hurley. Well done.
Yeah, and it's funny to me. There's only one player in this entire game who made more than 1 3-pointer. Obviously, it was not anybody from Purdue since they only made 1 as a team. The only player who did it was Tristen Newton. He went 2 of 5. That's it. That's it. I mean, they made 6 threes as a team. The 3-point shot was just a non-factor in this game for both teams. But again, I think if you were to tell somebody beforehand, like, hey, neither team is going to shoot it well from 3, neither's going to make more than 6 3-point threes in the game, you'd probably say that's the advantage UConn. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's what you'd think necessarily. But for Purdue to be so just neutralized in that way in this game was a huge factor. And we've talked about bench scoring and kind of what it means at this level at this point. A lot of the teams that make it to this to the national championship or the Final Four, they're not playing a lot of bench players. You're not seeing like 7, 8, 9 different guys scoring in games very often. That happens more in the regular season when you're giving guys more rest, etc. But in this game, it ended up being a fairly significant factor. Less so that UConn's bench dominated in any way, although Hassan Diarra had a stretch where he scored 7 straight points in a row. And I remember I put it in our notes of like, look, if Hassan Diarra is going to take over a basketball game for a 2-minute stretch, like that's a really bad sign if you're Purdue. And that's no disrespect to him. That's just, Purdue didn't game plan to have to slow down Hassan Diarra. But he has 9 points. Samson Johnson has 4 points. The 2 lob dunks that came at a really critical time for UConn. That's 13 points for their bench. That's 11 more points than Purdue had coming off their bench. They only had 2 points, like I said. Cameron Edey with that monstrous, just incredible putback dunk that he had in the second half. Like I think everybody jumped when they saw that. I was completely taken by surprise by that. That was a really tremendous play. But we talked about Mason Gillis being a potential X factor for this Purdue team coming into this game. I kind of said, hey, if he can space the floor and maybe make Clingan a little uncomfortable defensively and give Edey more room to operate, that could be a sign of positive things for Purdue. And Gillis he just didn't have an impact in this game. He had 4 points, 0 of 2 from the field in 24 minutes. He basically just wasn't really contributing in any meaningful way. And I think that's a testament to UConn defensively and them being able to execute their game plan. But again, if you're Purdue, it's like we have guys we normally go to in these situations, and they just didn't have it in this game.
And I think India Gillis had 4 rebounds, didn't score at all. Actually, if I can,
sorry if I messed that up. Yeah, he had four boards, no points. The only points were Edey.
And okay, let me quickly ask you: was that the dunk of the tournament? Like I saw Matt Norlander, whom I'm usually in lockstep with, said that Grant Nelson's not real dunk over Clingan on Saturday night was the dunk of the tournament. And I just can't get behind that because I don't even identify that as a dunk, quite frankly. And this, like, who had that on their bingo card of the national championship game? Cameron Edey with the highlight of the entire game, right? Like, Andy, you were ready for that. You called that, didn't you?
Look, I don't know if Norlander is at the game or what his vantage point was.
He was actually sitting right beside Ian Eagle, actually.
Okay, did you watch it on replay like 5 times? Because I did, and there's no way that's not the dunk of the tournament. I mean, the reach, the extension, the timing, like that was look, Grant Nelson's was impressive too, but I don't like to denigrate the throw in instead of the actual dunk. Yes, it's cooler when you grab the rim. Grant Nelson's was still impressive, but No, Cameron Heidi's was better. And I mean, I didn't watch, or I can't recall every dunk
Sure.
from every single game. I know Anton Watson had a in the air, like he caught it and he turned in midair and dunked it. That was an incredibly cool one. But
I remember that. Yeah, that was.
I'm taking Cameron Heidi's over that too. That was really impressive.
Well, Andy, one of the other things I think about was we had talked about Stephon Castle and if he would be guarding Braden Smith, similar to what he did against Mark Sears on Saturday night. And sure enough, that was the game plan. So, not often that we pat ourselves on the back, but I think that was a great call. So I'm going to physically do it right now because obviously Braden Smith had a better game than he did Saturday night, but of course he's going to, because that's what he does, Yeah. And, but I just thought that was great to have him bother him. And by the way, Steph Castle, this dude has made himself some money this weekend in Arizona, because the showing that he put on Saturday night, and then just a little bit of everything in this game from Castle. 15 points, made another 3, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. Man, I really like his game, Andy. If he, I think you said this to me earlier on Monday night, but if he can develop a consistent 3-point shot, watch out long-term, folks. This dude's an animal.
Well, UConn's back-to-back titles, Isaac, they have come in dominating fashion. Like, it is unbelievable how dominant this team has been in both this and last year's NCAA tournaments. And we got to start talking about this UConn Huskies team as a legitimate college basketball dynasty. That.
Sorry, live podcasting.
And we're going to do exactly that right after a word from FanDuel. Folks, it is playoff time in both the NBA and NHL, and baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel, it is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers will get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. So bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. What are you waiting for? Right now, folks, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. Right now, the odds for the national championship next year, folks, we're already there. We are already there. We are recording this. The court is still warm with UConn and Purdue, but we are already talking about next year's national championship. Duke is the favorite at plus 1,100. Kansas right behind them at plus 1,200. Alabama, Nate Oates, sounds like he's staying in Tuscaloosa, plus 1,500 for them. And then North Carolina and Houston and UConn all at plus 1,500 as well. So, folks, take your bets over to FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And Isaac, let's talk a little bit more about this win from the UConn perspective, not just the actual play on the court. We love that. We'll have more recaps about this game, I'm sure, in future episodes, talking about this Edey Clingan matchup and everything that went down on the basketball court. But I want to talk about what this means for UConn just more broadly as a university, just their 6th total championship, back-to-back, of course, and just what it kind of means for them from a legacy perspective. Because I think UConn has been a program that people have sort of struggled to figure out where to put them historically. They've made they've won a bunch of national titles, but they haven't made as many tournaments. They haven't made as many Final Fours as teams like Duke and teams that have more historic success like Carolina and UCLA and teams like that. But when you look back in the last 25 years now, I mean, it's hard to pick anybody that's not UConn, especially now with this 6th title since 1999. I mean, this team has truly immortalized themselves, and we've talked about them as being, the 3rd team to win back-to-back national championships since the tournament expanded in 1985. Duke did it in 91 and 92. Florida did it in 06 and 07. But here's the thing. Those two teams pretty much returned everybody from the previous year. Al Horford comes back, Joakim Noah comes back for those Florida teams. You go back to Duke, Grant Hill, Bobby Hurley, all those guys. Whereas this team, UConn lost 5 of their 8 leading scorers. It's the modern era. It's the transfer portal era. You lose guys. For UConn to be able to rebuild after losing so much talent and still get back to the national championship. Not only that, but to do it in the dominating way that they have. I mean, this is some seriously unprecedented stuff in college basketball.
Andy, it really, really is. And I told you before we started, I had like 4 tabs of Twitter open with stats typed up so that I could hit send as soon as the game ended. So let me just rattle off a couple of those because, folks, this is mind-boggling stuff. I just want you to reckon, like, as we're recording here, John Stewart says, is this the GOAT college basketball team? Is it crazier that the national zeitgeist doesn't care? Where is college hoops? Well, John Stewart, we care, and I'm going to tell you why this team is absolutely bonkers. Folks, prior to last season, no team had ever won the national championship by winning 6 straight games by 13 or more points. UConn has now done it twice in a row, and this year they upped it to 14 or more. Alabama was the closest game they played that was in the Final Four, and it was by 14. Another thing, as Andy said, UConn hasn't necessarily made it to this moment as many as other schools, but guess what? They've made it 6 times to the national championship game, and they've never lost. UConn is 6-0 in the national championship. And Andy, here's one that really, really sets it apart for me. You and I think it's safe to say, if you'll allow me to speak on your behalf on this, is that okay with you?
Yes, please.
Fantastic. Folks, Andy and I believe that even before this, that UConn had clearly cemented themselves as a blue blood. But even if you weren't already willing to accept that, that conversation is now over, and you must. There is no option. Because, Andy, here's why. There were only 4 programs in the entire nation that have won 6 or more NCAA tournaments. That's UCLA with 11, Kentucky with 8, North Carolina with 6, and the UConn Huskies with 6. Just those 4. Kansas? No. Duke? No. Villanova, Indiana. None of those teams are on this list, Andy. Only UCLA, Kentucky, North Carolina, and UConn have won 6 or more NCAA tournaments. That is absolutely mind-boggling, folks. If for SNL fans, welcome this team into the 6-timers club. I know it's 5-timers on SNL, but you get my point, Andy. What UConn has done since '99 is otherworldly.
And and look, UConn's, I get it. I get why it feels, like they're not, why some people think that they don't feel like they're in that conversation, because it has all happened as recently as it has, because like the start of the iconic Big East was really focused more on Villanova and St. John's and Georgetown and Seton Hall, and UConn wasn't really a part of that like iconic early Big East just dominance that they had. But like, I just don't see any argument at this point. Like I saw this, I think it's the last 25 or 26 years, it's probably going back to 99, that every team that has won the national championship has been a 1, 2, or 3 seed, or it has been UConn. Because UConn has, they won as a 4 seed last year. I think there was one other time, maybe even 2 other times where they were a lower seed than that. And I think, I don't know if that's what's holding some people back of like, well, so, some years they won it, it didn't feel like they were going to win it. They kind of went on that magical run with Kemba Walker, and they've had a couple other years where you were like, oh, that's the year that UConn won. I mean, even last year, like they were a 4 seed. They weren't expected to be the team that won it all. And I think that is maybe what is sort of driving that conversation. And perhaps part of that conversation could be an exploration on whether they were underseeded some of those years. I do think that could be an element of it. But also like, 6 titles in a 25-year period is just insane. I mean, it's just an unbelievable run of dominance. Even if some of those years it felt like they weren't the team that was expected to be there or projected to be there, that doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to me that UConn hasn't been to more like some people might say, well, they've only been to 6 titles. They've only been to the national championship game 6 times. Like, so you're saying if they've been 4 other times and lost, that would be better? Like, I don't know that really means much to me. I don't think that argument carries a lot of water to me. So to me, what they've done these last 2 years cemented it. I think they were already, more in that conversation prior to this as well. But this tournament run is perhaps the greatest of all time.
Yes.
I think that's an argument that in an era where there's so much parity, where there's more upsets than usual, we've ran the numbers on that. We know that generally is true, and that teams are more balanced. We're seeing more regular season upsets than we've seen in the past. For that all to be true, for UConn to have a team with a bunch of newcomers who weren't on last year's roster, and for them to ultimately finish this NCAA tournament with a margin of 140 points total. Isaac, that is the biggest margin of total victory in a single NCAA tournament ever.
Sheesh.
Kentucky in 1996 is second. Theirs was plus 129. Villanova in 2016, that was a really great basketball squad, plus 124. And then some team named the Blue Devils of Duke in 1999, and again, another dominant team, plus 123. And yet UConn this year, that is the biggest point differential in NCAA tournament history. What an incredible run this team had under Danny Hurley.
And Andy, what I love for this team too is that for all the accolades of everyone else, who is it that's been the leading scorer in both of these national championship games? None other than Tristen Newton, who, my goodness, what a guy. As you said, the only player in this game who hit multiple three-pointers. Great stuff there. And joins a club with Christian Laettner, who won it both in 91 and 92. Andy, quickly, before we flip the script to Purdue, I said this to you just before we hopped on. Did y'all watch Danny Hurley's post game with Tracy Wolfson? There is not a snowball's chance in hell that dude is moving to Lexington, Kentucky. I am going to go on record that saying this dude is not leaving Storrs, Connecticut. He's there to stay, and he wants to set up this dynasty, what we're talking about, for years and years and years to come. He is working on trying to figure out how to build a program in an era when that feels impossible because of the transfer portal and NIL. Danny Hurley is figuring that out right now, and I don't see him leaving anytime soon for that. Andy, disagree or agree?
Agree. Yeah, no, I think the odds of him leaving if UConn had lost this game might have gone up 1% or 2, but he doesn't want to leave the East Coast. He doesn't want to leave UConn. He doesn't feel like they're resource poor in Storrs, Connecticut, and he made that very clear after the game. He's not going anywhere. Nate Oates made it clear before this game started, by the way, that he doesn't plan to go anywhere. So Kentucky, we will see where they move. That is going to be, I can promise you all listening live right now, a very heavy topic of conversation over the next week plus, however long this takes for Kentucky. But I can tell you right now, it's not going to be Danny Hurley in Lexington.
Well, future number 1 seeds will not be tanking against 16 seeds, as we had joked throughout this week, now that Purdue proved that it doesn't always guarantee a national title. We got more on this great and epic season for the Boilermakers right after this. Andy, unfortunately for Zach Edey and Matt Painter and company, their quest to Pola, Virginia falls one game and 16 points shy, because that would have won the game. And Andy, as we well know, only 2 1 seeds have ever lost to a 16, and now they've both made the national championship game. 1-1, 1 lost, obviously, as we know. Andy, here's my question to you. Did Purdue do enough not to erase what happened last year? Because that will always be true. Same is true for Virginia and UMBC. That never goes away. But did they do enough to balance it or, get redemption in your eyes?
I'd like to think so. I mean, we don't have a lot of sample size of this happening to kind of know how the fan base and just general college basketball fans will react to it. Generally, from what we've kind of seen, fans really, really remember when you lose games you're not supposed to lose. Like, that sticks with you as a head coach. It has followed Matt Painter around. This team has frequently lost to double-digit seeds, that they hadn't made it to the national championship game. That followed him around for a long time. And I think he probably quieted a huge chunk of the doubters here. But you really got to win it. Like, you really got to win it. And I don't love the rings culture. I have talked about this on this podcast before. I think we're too focused on, like, if you win or you didn't win. And if you didn't win, it nothing matters. Like, I don't like that attitude. And I'm curious, like, if Virginia had done that, if Virginia had gone to that national championship game and lost, like, even now, 5 years later, like, Tony Bennett's team wasn't very good this last year. But I don't think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you probably are more plugged in with Virginia's fan base than I am, but, like, people were certainly frustrated with Virginia this year and are a little bit sick of Tony Bennett, but he's got a longer leash because he won that championship game. And people aren't sitting around constantly being like, well, he lost to a 16 seed, so we need to fire him 7 years later. But if he hadn't won that championship, I wonder if that conversation would have been a little louder. And for Matt Painter, like, he's got a huge leash at Purdue right now, but if they lose to a double-digit seed next year, if they get a 3 seed, a 6 seed, whatever, and they lose to anybody who's a double-digit seed, or they don't exceed the expectations of where they were supposed to be with whatever seed they get next year, it will get brought up. And I think it'll get brought up more than it would have if he had won this championship. And to some extent, I get that. Like, there's a difference between finishing second and finishing first. I'm not trying to say there's not, but I do think that there's too much emphasis on that. And I think, while in my mind, Painter getting all the way to the national championship game and playing at this level and losing to an all-time, incredible program in UConn, that tells me that he's really good and that that they kind of exercised a lot of those demons. But I don't know that everybody will see it quite the same way.
Andy, I'm right with you. And yeah, going back to what you said about Virginia, because if you say, hey, would you rather give back that national championship so that you were slightly better this year?
Mm-hmm.
No. And here's the thing with that rings culture that you just talked about. We have to make, like, maybe it can start with us, Andy. Maybe this could be part of our show's DNA and fingerprint, is that we need to champion Final Four appearances. Like, what a freaking accomplishment. There are 362 teams in Division I, and you were one of the last 4 of them. Let's celebrate Alabama. Let's celebrate Purdue and UConn and whoever it is that I'm forgetting right now, which is hilarious because it's completely belying the point that I'm making. But you know what I mean? Like, that has to be a thing where these are massive and major accomplishments, and just making it to something like that.
I feel like we're going to celebrate an NC State making it because they're an 11 seed, but like we don't celebrate the 1 seeds making it. And it's like, it's still hard to make it as a 1 seed too. And like, I think, UConn was expected to be here, but we've talked about this before too. UConn not only, wins back-to-back championships for the first time since Florida, but no other team who had won the championship the previous year had even returned to the Final Four the next year since Florida did it. I mean, the Elite Eight too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Sweet 16 was the furthest.
Sweet 16 is the farthest a repeat national champion had gone. That proves that it's just hard. It's hard to get back there. And Danny Hurley kept talking about how hard this tournament was. And I know some people kind of rolled their eyes at that because of how dominant they were, but it is hard. It's hard to get to this point. And I think for them to do it, for Purdue to get back to to get into the Final Four, to get into the national championship game after what happened to him last year, is a tremendous accomplishment. And I think that it should be celebrated. And I know that some people won't. We'll kind of treat it like, well, they didn't win, they didn't do what Virginia did, and that kind of gets held back against them. And I'm just not, I'm not really buying that.
Andy, let's talk specifically about more on Matt Painter and Zach Edey, because of what this man, Zach Edey, has meant to this program and really to all of college basketball for the last couple of years here. I just read a quote of Zach Edey's from the post-game press conference tonight, and he said, quote, "I've always said Matt Painter is someone who gave me a chance. I've been trying for 4 years to pay him back for that." And Andy, if that ain't what this is all about, if that's not at the heart of college athletics, and I know it's a different era, and I know all these things are different, but you and I, Andy, and hopefully everyone hanging out here with us, yes, we want to win, and we want, but at the end of the day, this is about these young men and these young women, like we celebrated on Sunday afternoon's national championship game, who are out there playing this game that we love and forming these stories in our hearts. And so this connection that this young man has with his head coach, who he finally got to the Final Four, who he finally got to the national champion. And he's like, he gave me a chance, and I'm just trying to pay him back and get Matt Painter to where I think he deserves to be as a coach. Andy, for me, that's what this is all about.
Yeah, it's a really nice story. I mean, Edey's recruitment being a top, like not even in the top 400 of his class, to have gotten to this level and to have been patient and waited his turn when he wasn't playing as much at Purdue, it paid off so handsomely for Painter, for Edey, for everybody. And I think it's one of the best stories in college basketball over the last couple of years. And I know people got a little bit tired of Edey and the way that he's officiated and how much he got talked about. And I understand that was an element of this run for him, but he's a really phenomenal basketball player, an elite college basketball figure, like one of the best that we've seen in a long time. And he deserves a lot of praise and a lot of flowers, even if he didn't quite get to lead this team to where they wanted to go, which, Isaac, that's kind of been the story of the Big Ten Conference. And that's sort of where I want to go to end the show here. Like, we've talked about the Big Ten streak of not winning a national championship a lot. It has been discussed a lot last year. It's been discussed a lot this year, and yet it continues. Tom Izzo led Michigan State to a national championship in 2000. Jason Richardson was on that team. Mateen Cleaves was on that team. And since then, Isaac, 8 times in the last 23 NCAA tournaments. That is more than 1/3 of the time there has been a team from the Big Ten in the national championship game. And all 8 times that team failed to win the tournament, failed to win it all. It was Indiana in 2002, Illinois in 2005, Ohio State in 2007, Michigan State again 2 years later in 2009, Michigan in 2013, Wisconsin in 2015, Michigan again in 2018, and now Purdue in 2024. 8 times in 23 years, the Big Ten, which, like, that's impressive to get that many teams in the national championship. But this was the year where it felt like Purdue might be able to end that, but now 0-8 since Michigan State's last title in 2000 for the Big Ten.
Andy, just because I like to be mean to myself, I want to see if I can get all of the champions that those teams lost to. Obviously, I'm going to start this year and work my way back. Purdue lost to UConn 24.
Yep, nailed it.
Michigan. Hey, way to go. Michigan lost to Nova in 18. Wisconsin lost to Duke in 15. Michigan to Louisville in 2013. That championship counts. Michigan State lost to North Carolina in 2009. Ohio State lost to Florida in 2007. Yep. Illinois to North Carolina in 2005. And Indiana to Maryland in 2002, right? Yes,
Maryland.
Let's go.
That's okay. The one that I would have struggled with, but yeah, nope, you nailed it. It helps that Carolina's a couple of them, but yeah, well done.
Man, folks. Yeah, I mean, it really is wild that the Big Ten has not been able to do, and with this many, I think that's the thing. They've had all of these entrants in the national championship game, Andy. Like, it would be different if we were like, oh, they've only made it twice in that span. But we're talking about this in the same breath as we're saying UConn has made it to the national championship 6 times since 99, and they've won all of them. The Big Ten has been there more than that and won none of them, Andy, in essentially that same time frame. That is almost mind-bogglingly and statistically, like, improbable. I'd love to get Evan Meir or Ken Palm or somebody on that to talk about the lack of statistical probability of that. But I mean, and now the landscape totally changes, right? We're bringing in all these new teams to the Pac-10, into the Big Ten, which, by the way, the Pac-12's drought, by the way, folks, reminder, is even longer than this one, and now is going to live on for who knows how long, unless this we get a little Jesus situation out of the Pac-12 at some point here, Andy, in the post-Easter moment. So just a wild title drought for the Big Ten that carries on for at least one more year.
The Washington Huskies are going to end the Big Ten's title. It's going to be somebody super random. Like UCLA wouldn't be that random, but it's going to be somebody really obscure joining the Big Ten who's going to end that streak. Isaac, thank you to all of you, including yourself, my friend, for being with us here today. I love these live shows, love these opportunities to talk with you all after the game. Sad that we're not going to have any of these opportunities for until November, until we get back to college basketball season. But folks, we're not done. We're going to be with you every single day, 5 days a week here on the Locked On College Basketball podcast throughout the entire offseason. For this week, it's going to be a lot of talk about Kentucky. Who are they going to hire? If it's not Nate Oates, if it's not Danny Hurley, do they throw a bag at Scott Drew? What does this look like? It's going to be a huge talking point here. And then we're going to get more into the transfer portal. We're going to continue to recap the season, get you ready for the NBA draft, get you into offseason mode. Every single thing that's going on in college basketball over the next 6 months, we're going to have it here on Locked On College Basketball. So hit that subscribe button if you have not done so already. Hit that little bell so you're notified when shows come out. Again, we are on all audio platforms. We're also on YouTube. Check us out there. Again, appreciate every single one of you. Shout out to the everyday listeners. Would love to have you sticking with us throughout the offseason. But until then, and in the most sincere way now than we've ever said it, apologies to the Loyer family. Let's go Wildcats. And until the official offseason begins, peace out.